took a sabbatical from his teaching duties at the University of Illinois and came over to Muncie to the College of Architecture and Planning and taught with us for the academic year 76-77. At the end of that year, he had several options open to him. One of the options was, at one time, was to go to Mexico for the winter. And after the 76-77 winter, that sounded awfully good to me. But practice was awfully interesting to him at that point. So he joined the firm of Land Plus West. We're very happy that he came back to Ball State this spring quarter, just 2 months ago, and then he's back with us again. I accused him of going with Land Plus West instead of staying with Ball State last year when I had threatened to arrange lectures for him at every civic club in town with that wonderful lecture he did called The Greening of America? No, The Great Green Desert. And it's one of the most exciting lectures that I've heard in our college, one that stimulated a lot of discussion around town. Don came to us from Illinois, where he'd been an associate professor. He also had graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of Illinois and a Master of Fine Arts degree in 1962. He twice was a Ryerson traveling fellow from Illinois. He has written a considerable number of articles for periodicals, considerable number of plans and landscape and planning proposals. He's done a considerable amount of landscape consultation and professional work. We're very happy that he's here again to lecture for us tonight. Don Walker.
The title of my lecture tonight is The Irresistible Path. Could be the path to temptation or knowledge or old age, reason or ruin, and unfortunately or fortunately it's none of those. First I'd like to say that just as all of you by your presence indicate that there's nowhere on earth that you'd rather be than right here tonight, I'd like to say that for myself. And if you turn the lights out, the earth is here with us. And it provides a little context for this lecture. The lecture is about paths, simple paths, also called walks, routes, ways, footways, walkways, pathways, road, course, channel, track. It might be the connection between where you are and where you want to go, or the trodden way from where you were to where you are. The reason I have this picture up here is to provide a little grandeur for what is otherwise a rather pedestrian subject, and also to remind me to mention that, like the weather, the winds, and all other aspects of our day-to-day lives, including this, which is a drawing of the various paths that the Mississippi River has followed at different periods of time. Southern Illinois, that Cairo is that little peninsula that's sticking down between the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. That a great many things that at one time we thought were accidents because we didn't understand why they took the form that they do. What I'm going to try to point out this evening is that paths are a natural phenomena which it is possible to understand. First, I'd like to show a few pictures of some of the old chestnuts from Europe and how irresistible some of these places are. You may find, as I do, that I'd much prefer the pathway into a large lighted space or the pathway out of a dark into a lighted space. I think this is a little bright, as a matter of fact. Is there some way I can turn this off? I'm going to leave it on. I'm going to need it. So my preferences are going from dark spaces into light spaces. And of course you can't go out of the dark unless at some point you go in. So there's a little problem with that. But here we're going from a dark space into a light one. And those people are down about to enter a dark space. Some of you may prefer the opposite. This first series is axial, symmetrical, straight line pathways. They're formed by buildings and plants, buildings or plants, or only buildings. In many cases, as you can see here, the plants are treated as structures rather than as plants. That's not always so. And they have a certain amount of, or you have a certain amount of resistance or non-resistance to traveling through these. Very often, you want to travel along them because there's something at the end that you want to get to. It may be a shop, place of work, or as here, a suggestion of something that you can't see from where you are, and it has enough drawing power that you can't resist going to find out what is through that little hole at the end. Unfortunately, I'm not going to show you. These two pictures are of the same place, Villalante, one looking toward, from the open space to the enclosed space beyond the fountain, and the other is up in that space looking back. I find this much more irresistible than the other. And I think that it's probably true of most people that they would feel that way. Now, it's more difficult to make a path irresistible if you don't have enclosures on the sides, because they're interesting things that you can see, or even that you could travel to instead of following the designed path. This is an example of that. Some
people find this path irresistible. See them walking, which is almost unbelievable to me. I felt it irresistible enough to drive along and stop now and then to take a picture. So compulsion may cause some people to go a great distance to see very little, or a short distance to see quite a lot. In each case, the distance, total distance, is about the same in these last two pictures. A little later, or not later, this is sort of a transition from an axial symmetrical system to a axial, not quite symmetrical pathway, and is also puts together a number of the elements that make a path, I feel, irresistible. That is, the goal is lighted, there are people there, and it has plants or color, in this case flowers. Might be irresistible to last as this because of its of the structure that's the end, just because it's a religious structure.
These are several axial non-symmetrical examples. All of which you have seen before, at least in photographs, I'm sure. Again, all building, some building and some plants, or all plants. In all of recorded history, there seem to be two ways to get from where you are to where you want to go. One is the direct, straight route, and the other is the indirect, curving, turning route. Here we have a difference of opinion in one place. And when it comes to pathways, I find that I choose the path to the right rather than the one straight ahead. I guess because I shun the military way to do things as much as I can. But I think most other people do too, although they don't realize it. So here we have some curving, perhaps irresistible paths. I find them to be. Now, this one is irresistible because there's nowhere else to go. And for this lady, there probably is no other means of transportation to get from where she was to where she has to be. A lot of us are in that same situation at this university every day, maybe without the walls, but with the locations and the deadlines there to draw us. Some paths are more resistible than others. This one, although the space may be not unlike others you've seen and will see, the street furnishings
and the actions of the occupants suggest that it isn't a place to go wandering through. And this one, because of its eeriness, morbidness perhaps, does not tempt me at all. Street furnishings, the fact that other people following this path encourage me to do so as well, or want to do so. And sometimes there are certain ephemeral characteristics that indicate or draw you to a certain direction. This, one of the Ramblas in Barcelona, is one of my favorite paths. Not many people realize that it's above the river, which has been tunneled from the outskirts of town down into the bay. It has the people, has flowers, has light, has plants, and it has walls on either side so that... Sure. Okay. It has walls on either side so that you really don't have much choice, even if you could find a nicer path to walk along. There are a couple of paths in this country which deal with a much more difficult problem, and that is how to have people walk on paths when there are no walls to keep them in. This example is at the clearing in Door County. It was the home of Jens Jensen. It's still a school, summer school, has weekly educational programs, and a small community of 20 to 30 people live in these little buildings. This is the pathway from the driveway to the main lodge, which is the dining hall you see on the left, and then the other buildings are dormitory buildings. And just a few pictures showing the sequence as you walk along this path. Another path by Jens Jensen, which doesn't even have the buildings or the walls to keep you on the proper way, is Lincoln Memorial Gardens in Springfield, Illinois. Unfortunately, Lincoln Memorial Gardens in the last 10 years has changed from the pictures you see to something much less attractive, but that's another story. When you enter Lincoln Memorial Gardens, this was the path that you were faced with, and after you walked a short distance, you got a glimpse of Lake Springfield, which is fairly irresistible to most people to get down by the water. So you go in that direction, space opens up, and the path opens up. You walk down closer and closer. You find that Jens Jensen has done something very simple to keep everybody from trampling right down the end of the path to the lake shore. That when you get to the end of the path, you have to go in one direction or the other, so that when you finally do approach the lake shore, you're walking parallel to it, and the trampling is almost eliminated. Other devices that he uses on his pathways, the play of light and shade, darkness and lightness, where you go from the light into the dark and back out again. Light, dark, out to the light, and sometimes back into the dark. And you can do this without buildings if you have vegetation that is dense right near the ground. Unfortunately, a great many people in our population, maybe rightly so, are afraid that something might grab them in the woods and carry them off or even do some bodily harm. So that what we're left with is sometimes many people, either all at once or over the course of a day, many people trampling the landscape with no way to control where they go. There are a number of ways to deal with this problem. You can put moats around the routes that you want people to follow. Sometimes you don't even put water in them. You can put walls around the routes you want people to follow, but they don't often work, or at least sometimes they don't keep people on the path. You can put broken glass on the top of your walls. That is an encouragement. In Scotland or England, where people are very respectful of the desert, green desert, you can put delicate little fences. Or you can pave the whole thing. Sometimes you put delicate little fences on top of walls in front of moats. But at universities, which really should be the proving ground for how people and the landscape could live together in harmony, we see that walls work, but shrubbery doesn't. In the background, you see that benches work, but even little fences don't. So I was pretty interested in this subject when I was at the University of Illinois, and my colleagues pointed out that if I wanted to advance in my career, that probably what I ought to do is write some research grant proposals. And you know what research grant proposals are. It's the proven way to take the enjoyment out of anything that you all and if ever wanted to do. But I started to work on writing grant proposals and slaved over them night and day. And whoops, would you change that, please? No, that's the wrong one. Whoops, that's not the right one either. Well, there's supposed to be a blank someplace up there. I fear that everything's out of sequence, just that blank didn't show up. However, needless to say, I didn't get those proposals finished. They were proposals to go to a exotic land to see how things happen there, so that I could have a fresh perspective when I come back to my own society. And since I didn't get the money to go away, I decided to look at a local society that was somewhat different from the one I was used to. Turns out it's not all that different. See, these, the members of this society something has happened to our projector, I think. Only one of them is working. And I don't think I can back up. No? Okay. Could you back that out a bit? About 2. All right, that's fine. I don't know about the other one. Back the other one up, I guess, also. Anyway, you can see that the members of this society have investigated every inch of this piece of land, but they have some favorite, for one reason or another, favorite destinations, and obviously they also have favorite routes to those destinations. So after learning what I could from this, which is what you just heard, I decided to, that one should back up about 3. Try 2. Back up 1 more. Well, let's see what happens. You can see that these paths are well worn. In fact, you can see various fainter paths and the most important ones. So what I did is I went to a similar culture, not too far from the first one, with similar terrain. This happens to be in Bloomington. And yes, indeed, there they were. People have special favorite destinations, and they follow similar routes. So armed with this knowledge, I felt confident enough to look elsewhere and found that horses do it the same as IU students, and cows do it the same as IU students. And this may be a little difficult to see, but even snails do it the same as IU students. So the first principle in the design of paths is to realize that many individuals choose the same path. You don't have to pave everything. Another point is that paths rarely follow straight lines. Even in locations where there are no obstacles whatsoever. And I discovered 2 pages in Jacques Rilot's book about the layout of paths, which is one of the few published materials I know of on the subject. He says that paths follow slalom curves. People want to get from where they are to where they want to be along a reasonably direct route. And here at Ball State, you can see that they don't follow the paths if there's a better route. This is through the parking lot, across the driveway. Here at the University of Guelph, see the entrance, the building, and this person's cutting through the snow, across the driveway to that entrance. And if you turn and look in the opposite direction, you see many people weaving on a zigzag course through the parking lot. Some other points about paths are that people, well, paths are incorrectly placed, ones that exist, and very often they're absent. This intersection would probably work, or maybe it doesn't work even at West Point anymore, but it probably did at one time, but nowhere else where you have many people walking around through the wind and the snow and the rain, the sun, day and night. And if they trample long enough, as they will, you can read on the ground where the edge of the path should in fact be. Now, those last 3 were classic short shortcuts on the corners. And this is a long shortcut on a corner, and it's a complex 3 crescent curve. First, you have to get through the shrubbery. Then you make your big curved arc, and then you have to have another little curve at the other end to get through the shrubbery. I don't have many pictures I discovered with people in them making these paths. And I was wondering about that. I decided that one reason was because they were on vacation when I had the vacation and time to take the pictures. So in the last couple of weeks, I've made some effort to take pictures when people were walking, and unfortunately, the day I went to Bloomington, it rained, and I found that around here, if people are walking on them, in most cases they block out what I'm trying to show. So you'll see very few people making paths, but there they are, so you know they have to have trod them sometime. Another point about paths is that when people are traveling along them, they deal with obstacles in different ways. In many times they avoid them. And here you can see the pathway to the hospital, how it curves around the low branch of the tree on the right. But you also see another thing, back to point one, as the path curves to the left again, just before it gets to the walk. And that is, the people would prefer to walk on an existing path if there is one. So when they get close enough to it, they'll move over and get onto it. You'll see that happening quite often in all of the pictures. This is a shortcut up over a low wall and around the building to an opening on the other side, and is also shown in plan in some projects I had several of my students do at one time, and that is to record natural paths on the campus. You see, the path goes from a corner to a corner, another usual phenomena. As it curves and heads for an opening. There's another one from a parking lot on the right to a corner on this side. It narrows down where the low branches occur and goes through a whole hedge which probably was made by the path makers. Now this is at Krannert Center, which is a building at the University of Illinois. You see it has sidewalk on the east and on the south, and the main campus is to the west. A very large dormitory unit is to the northeast. The universities seem to keep adding buildings at the edges and never revising the ground in between to make up for the increased traffic. That's partly because of the way their budgets are set up, but I think also partly because the way their minds are set. This being, I think, maybe the perfect example, and I wish I had a picture of it. At first, people just cut the corner of the path, and so the sidewalk, and so the university put up those usual post and chain. So then everybody walked on the inside of those little post and chains, and then they decided, if they're going to go that far in and around the trees, why not, make it a real shortcut. So they went in to where this path is located now. At which point the university added some posts and chains from the corner, across the corners. But that didn't deter anybody. They just step over the chain. So the university, who apparently has a lot of unemployed medical personnel at the university hospital, at that point came out and attached large spikes to the fence at that point. Now here is a marvelous example. Again, it's the University of Illinois, and these are parked cars with new dormitory structures here and there, main campus, the other side, and one of my students spent quite a time here checking out all the different ways that people went. The records on the soil or in the grass are there for anybody to see, but on the pavement you have to observe to see where people go. You see these little lozenge protected areas where there are tree trunks, signs, steep slopes, and things like that. And here's a small example of the same kind of thing. You see the signpost, which has a little lozenge around it, and the crabapple tree. Also at the left, you see a post with a chain that's supposed to be going to another post, as well as the center post disappears regularly, as I'm sure you know that happens around here. So that's another way to deal with obstacles. Some obstacles you put up with, and some you put down. If you look outside our own building, you see that here is an obstacle. It happens to be a grade change, plus plants, and people respect it fairly well. Also, the curve, which heads right over to a corner. You can also see other areas that are more and less protected when you get in the distance, as here. At IU, in the distance behind this building is a huge dormitory complex. And apparently, behind me, there's something that a lot of people want to get to. The way they're supposed to go is to walk along the sidewalk where those cars are to where the road bends, then take a left and go up some stairs. Apparently, that's not the favorite route. And looking back from the top, you can see the university is trying to discourage this without much success, and you can see the phenomena of the bifurcated path, which happens here because you go to where the chain is long enough to step over. It happens here, you can't tell why actually, but there's one little branch from that tree that hangs down just about eye level, so that you walk out toward the door, which is behind that orange vehicle, that's where you're aiming for, and you get about halfway over there and suddenly that branch is in the way and you have to go one way or the other. Also, it starts at a corner. And here's the parallel path system because people were walking around the end of the fence, so the university added one more section. So people walked around the end of that fence, so then the university added 6 more sections, and I don't have pictures to show it, but at the present time there is a paved path across this area. Here, although the paved path is curved, it's much too sharply curved, as well as the fact that there is no obstacle to avoid in the direction that we see. Most of those pictures were pictures of paths, paved paths that were incorrectly designed. I have a few here where there are no paved paths provided whatsoever. People are at the left in the distance, that little opening in the shrubbery is a major walkway, and again, apparently many people want to go behind me. Apparently, the designers figured that they were going to walk across the driveway onto those little islands, because there's a little path, there are little walkways on the other side, and then come down. People don't do that, and the only reason they're all walking the street right now is because it's too muddy. Some places, mud or not, the path or the route is so irresistible that you'll take it. These pictures, well, those pictures of IU campus, I think are especially interesting because a number of people told me at different times when I talked about what I call natural paths, the ones you see here, the ones that people make with their feet, that what they do at IU is they follow the paths that people make with their feet. And they pave them so that one might think that all the paths at IU were, along the routes that people want to take. Obviously, that's not the case. Here we have some pathways. The one on the right comes through an opening that's provided to get into this field, and then makes its own opening on this side. The one on the left goes through at the corner, makes an opening at the corner, and comes down here and makes another opening. Now you see there are two reactions here. First reaction is the university came along and put a chain across. The second reaction is somebody came along and put some stones in the mud so that they could more easily step over the chain and not get their feet wet. This illustrates, again at IU, another principle. That is that if people can see where they want to go, they're going, at some point along the paved path, they're going to make a turn and go toward that goal. And in most cases, it seems to be 15 degrees. And I believe it's 15 degrees because our angle of vision is 30. And if your goal, which you can see, is more than 15 degrees off of dead center, you're going to have to turn your head to see it. At which point, it tells your feet something, and off you go if you can. Here, doesn't look like much of a path, but in the distance you can see that a pathway is forming. What happens is that a lot of people want to get around there, take a shortcut around, but they don't all start in the same place. And this particular kind of grass on this particular kind of soil and this particular kind of climate can withstand just so many people before it begins to show wear and tear. I don't think anybody knows, and no research has been done to find out just how much it'll take. But as you get over in that direction, you can see the convergence and more people joining it as you go around the bend. And then you can see where it hooks up onto a corner, makes a little S there. You can also see that the university has put a chain at that point. And you can see the little green ridge that people don't step on as they step over the chain. As well as in the background, another path which is so heavily used that people will walk through it even if they get muddy. The reason it's that configuration because they're squeezed down between the branches of a tree on the right and one on the left. Here's another sequence where, again, you see the people are stepping over this fence. Well, the university doesn't apparently realize that because only about half the people are stepping over this fence. The other half are going, this is a little bit up further, are going around the end of where the fence ends, where the fence ends at the present time. You see what the university is doing? They're putting up more fence, which means that all the people who are going around here will go back to stepping over the fence where the other half do. As you go to the left along this pathway, you see where a couple converge, avoid obstacles, further around, step over a fence, and another one converges. And if you go down to the right at the end of that walk, see where even the third one converges, the S-curve, the avoidance of mud. You might think that this is some kind of a two-wheeled vehicle with all the weight on one side. In fact, what it is the second path is used when the first one is muddy. And in places like Turkey Run, this kind of treatment caused some of the pathways on the steep hillsides to become 30 and 40 and 50 feet wide as people keep getting out of the mud to walk along. Problem. And here at Ball State, this one had me confused for a while, and probably what I ought to do now is go out and check it when it's in use. But here we have parallel paths, almost, and probably some of you know why the path is this way, but I'll take a guess because I haven't seen anybody using these. Actually, this is a complex path. These are two paths, two natural paths, paralleling the paved path. The one from the driveway up is a jogging path. People jog to the left up by the building there. They come around along this driveway, and then either because they don't like to jog on the sidewalk or because they're jogging at lunchtime when other people are using the sidewalk, they kind of weave their way in and out of the posts, causing that little path, natural pathway there. The one in the foreground had me stumped for a while until I realized what it is. It's a bicycle path. As you ride your bicycle down, you're faced with dropping off a curb and coming up another curb. And so you just cut to the left, back on the sidewalk again. I think that's the way it is. Driveways or parking lots are a special case. I'm standing in a parking lot at the end of the bay. Obviously, a lot of people park here who want to go in that door, and they do, no matter what. Of course, their choice was to go about 120 feet either direction and around and back. They don't do that. At IU, they're pretty adamant about getting from the parking lot to where they want to go. There's a walkway at the bottom of the stairway there. You can see maybe there's a chain fence to the left, to the right of that post. There's another chain fence here. And right in the middle of the picture, you see a bent post. It's definitely an irresistible path. This one is one of the very straightest that you'll see. It comes off the corner of a parking lot. The last two came off of the bay, the aisles parking lots. This one comes off the corner, which is another favorite location for paths to start, and ends up, most of the people end up at this intersection corner, although you can see that 15 degrees attracts a certain number, but a minority in this case. At Richards, parking is at this side and the entrance at the other side. There is no provided path of any kind, so we'll make one. Corner of a parking lot, everybody walks out from it, and then some go this way and some go that, and apparently not enough go either way to make a mud path or even a dirt path in this case. They go around the obstacle of the shrubbery. At the top of the picture is a major walkway on the opposite side of the driveway, and you can see that, mud or no, people are going to walk off the end of the parking lot to that. This also is a parking lot where the traffic goes across through the aisles. Parking lot across the way, there are little peninsulas with trees in them. Behind me is a dormitory, and wherever there's one there, one at the opposite end of the picture, wherever these peninsulas stick out with the trees on them are places where people come off the lot. And this is that IU parking lot again, where a major amount of traffic is across the lot rather than along the aisles. So there's a trail between every car. You see this quite often. I don't know if it's the mailman or friends of the owner. We see this. Intersections are just too sharp. These intersections are both too sharp, and the path is not adequate for the number of people who at lunchtime or between classes trample this way. This is a slight aside, but the same thing is true of bicycle path, at which this is, and I don't know how many people besides me have caught their back wheel in these depressions and skinned the knee out of pants. Now here is an example where, and this happens quite often, a path goes nowhere. What you're supposed to do, this picture's in backwards, so maybe you won't be able to see how it works with the next one. What you're supposed to do here is put a jog on the driveway to the left, and then go over to the right. Well, not many people are doing that. You can see the hedge is battered down and the mud path. It's especially difficult to keep people from doing that if you go and look at the other side. This is now flipped the other way, where you can see the path you want to get to through the break in the hedge by that light post. And what you're supposed to do, according to whoever designed the path, is make this jog to get around to it. People are in a hurry, and many of them, and have to do this many times a day and week. They're not about to do that. This was a natural path. The university paved it. Obviously inadequate. The one in the background was probably a natural path, which has been paved. Here's an obstacle, and you see what happens at the corner. There's just not enough room on the pavement to walk, so we'll have to trample a little bit extra. This looks very straight with a kink in the end of it. I think probably the university did not follow the path that was designed by people's feet, because a similar thing happened at the University of Illinois. You see the path as it responds to the corners, as it responds to the obstructions, as it responds to the slight rise in the terrain. And finally, the university gave up the fences and decided to put in a pathway. The natural path is still on the left, as you can see. The insensitivity of designing is obvious. And again, at IU, some of the paths that people do use probably after a great deal of soggy feet and muddy floors. Another example coming in, supposedly paved natural path. You see that they don't line up the way they're paved. And in the background, there's a little wiggly one plus a big wide one, which seems to indicate that there should be a better way. Or here, both of these down by Cooper, where it's obvious people are going to cut across where these major paths come so close together. Especially if you're a bicyclist, there's the bicycle rack, and you're coming from this direction. Apparently you're supposed to go way around and back again. And again, this young lady is walking on the paved path only because the one that she probably usually takes, which is further to the left, is very muddy. And you can see that if the response to natural path making is to pave natural paths, pretty soon we'll get back to everything paved. There has to be a little bit more design and, if you want to call it, manipulation of the trotter. Again at IU, eyesores, I think almost every one. Now, if this works out right, it did, we have a meandering stream. And what I'd like to make these next few slides is that some natural paths, unlike some that you just saw, are at least as beautiful as natural streams. Not ready yet. Yes. Here you see two meandering routes. The one on the left actually is a rivulet, and the one on the right is a path. These are paths that people have made just by walking. They're always curved. Here is one that branches. Some made paths follow very nice routes, but most of the time it'd be hard to call them beautiful. This is it with timbers. In Indianapolis. And this at the Knoll, which is another apartment or condominium complex in Indianapolis. So there have been occasions where someone has seen the desirability of putting paths where people would use them. This is in Paris. That pathways don't always have to be asphalt or concrete. Maybe they can't be quite as exotic as this. But in Europe, most park paths are paved with a mixture of gravel and clay that, except for one project that Novak's office did at Reese Hospital in Chicago, I don't know where this technique has been used in this country. Another principle or point I'd like to make is that apparently some pathway designers like to play practical jokes. This is a Cooper. Here we have this grand pathway to nowhere with fuzzies in the middle and completely tree. The surrounding tree seems to be irresistible to some. Why this path has to be exactly where it is beyond me. Actually, this is more sensitive than what a number of people might do, which is to remove the tree, because that path has to be exactly 20 feet from the front of the building. And this at the timbers. Somewhat akin to this. There must be, maybe there's something in this part of Indiana about keeping devils from following you. Or maybe this is in response to the shadow patterns. I'm not sure what it might be. But in Minneapolis, on an even larger scale, could you believe this? There must be a place for 1,000 cars, and behind me is the Minneapolis airport. Also, another point is that very often paths are built straight because it's much too difficult, too expensive to build on curves, which sort of tells us where pedestrians lie in relationship to automobiles or in relationship to the water that runs off those roads that the automobiles drive on. Because someone seems to be able to design and to afford to build beautiful concrete swales. The last point I'd like to make is that it is possible and desirable to pre-design natural paths, which I'd like to call irresistible paths, based on these 4 principles. The first is the path must go almost straight toward a seen goal, and it should curve around obstructions, that people tend to follow an existing path. Therefore, you don't have to pave the whole thing. If there was a path there, they're likely to use it unless it grossly contradicts some of the previous points, which includes a 15-degree maximum deviation from your seen goal. I have a couple of examples. This happens to be an interior. It's at the convention center in Indianapolis. We're going from a smaller place into a larger place into a smaller place, which people don't like to do, but the smaller place is very brightly lit, and so that counteracts that. And that's almost an irresistible interior path, partly because you want to go there, partly because you haven't got much choice, partly because it's attractive. Now, what they did outside the building was virtually nothing. But that's usually the case. Millions for the building, and barely 1% for its surroundings. What they did do, up at the left side, this is the building, the heavy line. You see a short double line there. That's a pathway directly out from the building to the sidewalk, out to Maryland Street. That one was put in. And down at the right side here, that one that goes directly out to the pickup, that was put in. That's all. Across Maryland Street is the parking. So all the people who park there want to go to the convention center, apparently, it was supposed to come across the street and get on that sidewalk and walk parallel to the building, and so, or even away from the building, in order to get to the entrance. And nobody, or hardly anybody, would do that. And so they trampled across this whole site. To compound the problem, all those people who went to the entrance at the left discovered that it was locked because they never let anybody in there. And so they had to go trampling down in an irate mood to the entrance. So finally the maintenance people said that they would come up with the money and the labor and the rest of it to put in some kind of paths, and this is what has occurred. I wouldn't call it a natural path. It's much too straight, but apparently it works fairly well. This is looking from the closed entrance to the main entrance with a little obstruction, fairly direct route, and looking from the main entrance back toward the parking. It's not very beautiful. The other example is about the only opportunity I have had to actually design a path out in the landscape. What this was, or what this is a square block park with dead-end streets on opposite sides and a school up one of these streets, so that every day, 4 times a day, lots of little feet and little bicycles would go across this park. You can see where the bicycles would go, get into the park and out, where the curb is missing. You can also see where pedestrians would go, because there's no sidewalk on the other side of the street. This park also, has the unusual feature of having some shrubbery still in it, which you can see. So this, a few examples looking from the south toward the north. In this park, how it is eroded. The fact that you can see that white building, the one on the left, is right at the end of that little street. You can see exactly where you want to go. And in fact, the path goes that way. Not straight, but very direct. The Park District was going to put a paved walkway in here. And I could foresee a concrete pavement running right across the middle. So I donated my services to try to convince them to do something else. And they did. This is the site. The trees, the spaces don't show up very clearly, probably from where you are. But that's what we started with. And some of the considerations in locating the pathway. The highest ground is on the left bottom. The lowest ground is on the right top. The water, the runoff, would, in fact, go from this to that direction if it wasn't for the ditch that has been trampled across the middle. The open place in the middle is used by the grade school PE classes. They don't have any play fields of their own, so they come out here to play, and people are always tripping in that ditch. And it seemed as though it wouldn't be a good idea to have concrete running down the middle of the ball field. The shadows, which are cast, are shadows for 8 o'clock in the morning when children are going to school, and shadows for 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they're coming home. The noon shadows would just be directly underneath the tree. And you can see that on the west side of the space, the by the trees would be sunny in the morning and shaded in the afternoon. On the east side of the space, the ground by the trees would be shaded in the morning, which is the coldest part of the day, and sunny in the afternoon, which is the warmest. So using those four principles, which you saw before, looked at the possibilities for putting in a path. One could be straight, which would mean absolutely straight, from sidewalk to sidewalk, which would mean cutting some of the shrubbery down. One would be following the approximately, which is the straight one on the right. The one that's straight on the left is the approximate location of the existing ditch. The curve on the right follows the edge of the tree trunks, which would be on the lowest, wettest ground, coldest in the morning and hottest in the afternoon, and have quite a bend to contend with at both ends. And the one on the left, which is the one that's chosen, could be made to fit the criteria if a mound was built and planted up near the top of the sheet, so that people would have to go around that. And so that's what we did. You can see the divergence between the path on the right that used to be there and the one that's being put in. You can see the problem of the white beacon at the end that everybody wants to go to. You can see some of the little feet coming across the field. Also, you can see that some people decided to try the new path because there it was. And you can see some who refused to use it at all. And they told the people who were building it that they weren't going to use their path. And they didn't. Luckily, they were within a year or two of graduating to junior high school. So that problem was removed. But they were adamant. They knocked down the obstacles, and they went over the top of the mound, in between the plants. They refused to do it. Anyway, after the path, right after the path was still in construction, the curbs being repaired, ground sodded, new location put in. This was done before park districts had to provide ramps. They didn't want children riding their bicycles out into the street. They wanted them to have to get off to go down the curb, which I think is dreaming, but that's what they wanted to do. It's hard to tell from this picture, but the path is going around by the trees on the left. It's going by this forked tree and then slight brown indication here. This is several years later. What the path is, it's a wood chip path, and every summer when the power company is going around everybody's backyards and chipping up all the branches that are getting to the wires, they bring the chips, some of the chips out here, and the park district spreads it over the path. And the rest of the year, the part of it gets trampled so that nothing will grow, and part of it, the plants start to grow in from the edges. Perhaps you noticed in that picture that the beacon at the end was not to be seen. The mound with the trees, shrubs. Looking at it from the other direction, this is the street. The existing path on the left, the proposed path route would be on the right. This was to get people to bend around. This was the most difficult part of it. See what it was like. And it's not straight, though almost. On under construction with the classes playing. You see how much more field room they'll have without falling in the ditch. And looking at several different stages after it was put in place. With the various paraphernalia that the Park District stands around. I feel it's a fairly irresistible path, and I think proves that it is possible to pre-design a natural path and have it be a beautiful addition to the landscape. Before I close, I'd like to put in a little promotion. That is, if any of you want to get on the ground floor of this burgeoning science, next time you register for courses, you might inquire about Walker's pathology.